I'm laughing. This is the worst intro ever. As Scott says, do we have theme music? So, welcome to another episode of two old dudes and one middle-aged dude talking about stuff. Is this a podcast? We don't know. Is this a video for YouTube? We don't know. But it's something. So, there you go. So, I am Tim Hemingway coming to you from nice and sunny Utah today, and we got Scott and Bill coming from Vegas. How are you guys doing?
We are doing okay. I am sitting here in a damp t-shirt with my hair wet because the air conditioning went out in the house
Oh no.
today. Well, not the AC. The actual AC unit appears to be working. It's the attic fan isn't coming on, and we just had the attic fan replaced like 2 years ago. So I've got to call into our friendly neighborhood heating and air conditioning guy, and we do have a really good guy, but I have a funny feeling this is going to be another $300-400. In the meantime, it's like 84 degrees up here on this floor, and we've got the swamp cooler that I bought for the garage back when Scott and I were rehearsing out there.
Oh,
That is
man.
up in my wife's office, just trying to take the edge off it a little bit because she's too hot at anything over about 73. And of course, we
Happens.
live in Vegas, so that makes all the sense in the world.
So, what is the temperature down there right now?
It was hot today. It was like we didn't hit 100, but I was out in Red Rock, and it was
91 where I'm at.
101 where you're at. Well, you
No,
live in the
91.
hotter than that. 91.
91. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was hotter than that earlier. It's not. That's right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it was 93 out in Red Rock, and Red Rock's usually. I mean, Red Rock can be 10 degrees cooler than the rest of the valley. Not all.
99 was the high today.
So it
So
was hot.
I'll just be happy with my mid 70s and overcast
Yeah.
today.
Take it.
Yeah, it was awesome for a couple weeks before this, but then it just, the hammer fell and it did so quickly. So
Hey,
anyway,
quick question: Is this like a weather show? Is that what it is, or are we going to talk about guitars?
And now, at this time,
Hey, Bill.
sun will be coming up over here, all the way to the east.
To be a Vegas weatherman, it's like it's hot or it's hotter. So, so today's idea, I believe, was Bill's idea that's been expanded upon. So, Bill, why don't you jump in and tell us what we're talking about today?
okay,
And then
so
then I have some rules I made up that I'm going to
Yeah,
give you at
did
the
we,
end.
we
So go for it.
expanded upon it?
okay, so the original idea was to talk about the two albums that were like the stuff we were all listening to when we started in our first bands, and I think Tim right away said we can't do two, we better do like five, and so that was just kind of the idea. It's like the kind of like the music that formed us, and I mean that kind of stuff. So you have rules. We have actual rules.
Yeah, these are the rules. So we are going to do a countdown from 5 to 1. Each of us will do our 5, then 4, then 3, then 2, then 1. Is the way we're going to get there. And then the rule is, because I know everybody here loves to talk, you get a maximum talk time of 15 minutes, which works out to be 3 minutes per album. So, if you go on and on and on your 5, you'll get like 30 seconds for everything else. That's my rule.
Okay, I'm
That's
good with
fair
that.
enough.
So I'm watching the clock, and I'm kicking it off to Bill because he gets to kick it off because it was his idea.
Oh, great. And I'm the one who talks the most. Okay, so
3 minutes starting now.
if I had to, I didn't put them in order like that. And probably number 5 would be Fly Like an Eagle by the Steve Miller Band. And that was just this weird mix of psychedelia and blues, and we did a couple of songs off that. We did Take the Money and Run, and we did Rockin' Me. Now I have to say though, when I started to think about all this stuff, I realized that when I think of my first band, I think of my first working band, and I forgot there were 2 bands before that. So I had to like go back and hook up with people from like a million years ago and ask if they remembered this stuff. And the funny thing is, a lot of the songs that we were doing stayed the same. So and Fly Like an Eagle, great out. And if you want to expand it out from our actual bands, I actually played Fly Like an Eagle, the title cut, we used to do a version of that in jazz band at school because we had this hip jazz band director. And we did stuff like Steve Miller and
I
Frank
wish I
Zappa.
could have played in jazz band when I was in school. I was too stupid.
I got kicked out.
I should have gotten kicked out because I never learned to read very well, and so I was just like memorizing stuff, you know. But I could play the heck out of "Fly Like an Eagle," man. Da 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 da. That's really easy, you know. When it got into like Peaches and Regalia, that was way tougher.
So, I'm just gonna throw this a new idea out here. As you go through the album, pick out like 2 tracks for people not familiar with it. If you can, off the top of your head, and maybe afterwards we'll put together like a Spotify or Apple playlist or something. With our, like top 2 or 3 picks.
Yeah, the 2 big ones on that album were "Take the Money and Run" and "Rockin' Me." Those were really simple songs that somebody's just starting to learn how to figure out what a guitar is all about can play pretty easily, and we played them all the time.
Nice. Hey, and you kept it right at 3 minutes. Good job.
Woohoo!
Hey, Scott, it's your turn.
I didn't go in any order and there's just too many records, too many albums. So for me, stuff from when I was a kid was what I'm going to go through. Like and this Dion and the Belmonts.
Woo!
Live at Madison Square Garden. Now, I've never played any of these songs really per se, but my mom listened to this record all the time. It's one of her favorite records. Dion and the Belmonts is one of her favorite bands. We're from New York. We like Dion. Live Madison Square Garden. Backing band Billy Vera and the Beaters. This is an amazing record.
Well, the Billy and the Beaters is a great band. I used to see them at the Palomino all the time in like the mid '80s. God, I'm old.
And I don't know. I don't have like. There's just too many favorite records for me. This one was
Well,
a
I'm
great.
gonna tell you, this is one I'm not familiar with, so I will have to check it out.
Major tracks on this one are "Teenager in Love," "The Wanderer," "I Wonder Why," and a lot of these songs are in gangster movies. You know, like Casino and Bronx Tale, and "Teenager in Love" and "Runaround Sue." Those are huge Dion songs.
Keep away from a runaround too.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's a great recording. The place is sold out, 60,000 people.
And
I'm a
Dion's
kid.
still doing stuff, man. He's still playing around New York. He put out a new album, I want to say like 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's the stuff that I listened to when I was a kid. In the 60s.
So that's very cool. That actually, oh, I should ask Scott. Can I jump into mine, or are you?
Yeah, no, do go.
Okay. So I actually had this big debate on mine because I remember with my brothers, we used to pretend we were a rock band. And I grew up in a house, and I'll probably talk more about this, but we didn't have a lot of rock music in my house growing up. The hardest album we had was Moody Blues' Other Side of Life. So one of their kind of obscure 80s albums. My dad was a huge Moody Blues fan, and I almost picked that one. But then as I was going through my music history, I actually went to Bon Jovi's Slippery When Wet. That would be my number 5.
It's a great record.
And it would actually be, the song would be You Give Love a Bad Name. And the reason why is I was probably about 9 years old at the time. And I had this cassette tape.
How many?
It was about 9. I told you, 2 old guys in the middle age game. And so I had this cassette tape I got for like my 5th or 6th birthday. It was a Wizard of Oz cassette tape. And I remember I put tape over the tabs on it so I could record. And I remember recording You Give Love a Bad Name off the radio because I thought it was the coolest rock song I'd ever heard. and I remembered that I didn't want my mom and dad to get mad at me because it said the word hell in it, so I tried to edit that out. But I think that song, so obviously it started with You Give Love a Bad Name, and then, you know, the song also has Living on a Prayer, Wanted Dead, Dead or Alive. I mean, it is a fantastic Bon Jovi album.
An amazing record, man, and for that time period, I
No
mean,
doubt.
how many hits were on that record? Like 5?
Yeah, like 5, and it's
Like
just...
all of them?
No,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, you're right, like most of the hits, and it was such a huge album, but for me, it was like that realization that there was music outside of the Simon and Garfunkel and Neil Diamond and ABBA that was played in my house. And that's why I put it there, is that was the thing where I was like, I want to play electric guitar, I want to learn how to do this. So that would be my number
diss
5.
ABBA. Don't diss ABBA, man. I'm a big ABBA fan.
Oh, hey, I didn't diss them. I'm just saying that's what I grew up on, and this was like kind of my realization of there's a world outside of this. So, there you go. Who wants to go next on number 4?
Well, we're gonna round robin, and I'll go next. Okay. I'm gonna go with the one that we attempted to play some songs off of this album, and we did it badly, along with every other band in the world at this point in time. But that first Boston album, you know, that came out in. I was 16 years old. I remember going into there used to be a record store chain called the Warehouse.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yep, and I was like I was maybe 15, almost 16 years old. I remember going with my mom, and I had a few bucks in my pocket to buy some records, and there was this sign up about something about the 3 B's, and it was Boston, Boz, and the Boss. And, you know, because that Boston album and Silk Degrees and Born to Run all came out like within months of each other, within about 6 months. And all of those had a huge influence on me, and I'm a huge Bruce fan. I did not include that album because we never made an attempt to play any of the stuff on. I mean, that was his, you know, Wall of Sound album, and this stuff, you know, the tracks line up 8 million deep. There's 30 guitar parts on every song, and all kinds of stuff, and you had to have a real keyboard player. And I don't know about any of y'all, but we didn't have keyboard players. We had, you know, people with guitars and a bass and some drums, and we maybe had
rich to play
like that we
keyboards. Then.
shared. You know, nobody had keyboards, so yeah, the anyway, the Springsteen stuff was out, but we made attempts at least to play More Than a Feeling, and Peace of Mind for sure. Those two I remember for sure that we tried to do.
Well, you know, and I think this is just a testament to how incredible that album is. My oldest son is 14 right now, and he's learning to play guitar, and he and his buddies have been learning More Than a Feeling. That's what they've been working on this week. And so it's like,
man.
you know, that album came out, probably 40 years ago.
In the
And you've
70s,
got,
man.
you know, kids in 8th grade now trying to learn those tracks still. So pretty incredible.
You know, and you know, may he rest in peace. I got to interview Brad Delp at one point for Live to Play, and actually before it was called Live to Play, back when it was still singer and musician. But and he said these words. He said, "If I had known when I was 20 that I'd still be singing these songs when I was 50, I never would have gone for that note." And we all know which note he's talking about.
That's awesome.
Oh man, that's crazy. What a great rap! I never knew anyone like where we lived. Nobody played keyboards because that meant you had to have a Hammond or you know, a Fender Rhodes or a Wurlitzer, and you had to be a rich kid to have those.
You know, my parents got a Wurlitzer probably in the early to mid 70s when they got married. I think it was a wedding present because my mom was a pianist, and my dad finally got rid of it, and I regret not snagging that before he sold it.
Oh man, a classic Whirly.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
great,
there-
man. Great
there-
sound.
Very cool. Scott, I think we're over to you.
Let's see. Well, and not really any particular order, just kind of the oldest I started listening to.
Oh yeah.
This is the Edgar Winter Group. They only come out at night. And this is an amazing band. Chuck Ruff, Ronnie Montrose, Danny Huff, Edgar Winter, special guest Rick Derringer.
Yeah, that was a great record, man.
Yeah, Dan Hartman. Dan Hartman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he, this is the original record from when I was a kid. Dan Hartman, I Can Dream About It. That was some other song he had in the 80s. But this one was Free Ride, Frankenstein. Those were like the big hits that everybody knows. But an amazing record. I
Never
can't
tried
believe.
to play Frankenstein. Nobody I knew tried to play Frankenstein, but we all tried to play Free Ride.
Yeah, we all tried to play Free Ride. That was the big like AM radio song then. Yeah, and they all looked cool. I always thought that's like wow, that's like a rock and roll band, But in the '70s, that was a rock and roll band.
That's
So
cool.
yeah,
And again, still doing it, man. Edgar Winter just put out a new record, like in the last few weeks. He did a kind of a tribute to his brother Johnny, and there's
look at those lamb chops, man.
I know. I love those.
Yeah, great record. I wore the shit out of that record. I play it and it still had that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, great
It's,
record.
I think so. I kind of was at the tail end of vinyl, and I actually love that Scott brought visuals today.
Oh yeah, I gotta have visual aids, man.
I have them for my top 3, but my thing is I came up in the CD era. And
Sure.
I, for the life of me, could not find my box of CDs to pull the actuals out. So, but this is my number 4. I'll give you, and I do have the CD if I don't have the vinyl. But after this, 3, 2, 1, and 1, I will have vinyl for. So I'm almost as cool as Scott.
You're very cool.
But my number 4, actually would be Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' Greatest Hits. And I think I actually wrote an article about this not too long ago. But I remember my very first band, we only knew probably a dozen chords between the 3 of us as we were trying to put together a band. And we were trying to write songs, and we were going through the chord progressions the chords we knew, trying to figure out a progression. And we figured out Mary Jane's Last Dance. And it was just maybe one of the coolest moments of my beginning years of playing was figuring out that, A minor, G, D, just basic progression. And we played that nonstop. And I think the reason why that resonated so much with me is, my older brothers were really into like the 80s rock and the Shredder stuff. And obviously Metallica was really big and things like that. And that album was the one, like, I didn't even realize Tom Petty had stuff prior to that album, even though it's called Greatest Hits. That's how dumb I was at 13 years old. But that album is kind of like a resurgence in a lot of ways. And I know Free Fallin' had been a big hit, probably like 89 when that came out. But that also put that all over like modern rock radio as well. Those were kind of the 2 big tracks that got tons of play from that album. But I think it just kind of blew my mind at how simplistic some of the songs were. Once again, Free Fall, it's 3 chords, the entire song.
Yeah.
Mary Jane's Last Dance is 3 chords. Mike Campbell has some amazing leads, but he also plays some really simple stuff, but it just works. And because of that album, Tom Petty became Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, or Tom Petty solo, it doesn't really matter. It's all kind of Tom and Mike, no matter what it is. Just became kind of like, for me, like the definitive of like American songwriting. Like, I just love everything about that band. And honestly, when I look at like bands I have not seen live, my biggest regret is not seeing Tom Petty live.
I
Yeah,
saw
great
Tom Petty
stories.
live a few times, and I saw the what was that one, Southern something?
Southern Exposure?
Southern Accents.
Or Southern Accents, yeah.
Saw
That's
the
it.
Southern Accents tour with the horn section at the Wiltern. That was a great show. Saw the Heartbreakers backing up Bob Dylan once, which was a really
Oh,
interesting
that's so
show.
cool.
Well, I think Southern Exposure was a strip joint in Rancho Cucamonga.
I think it's one in Utah as well. I was not going to bring that up, but now that Scott did, I would say that's. I
It
know
just
Scott's
came
mind
to
went.
me. I'm like, wow, where'd that come from? I must have went there after a Tom Petty concert.
But I mean, Tim brings up the simplicity, but a big part of that was just, I mean, and Tom was a great writer, another one sadly gone, but that band, oh my God, that band. And the guy who does not get enough credit in that band, as far as I'm concerned, is Ben Montent.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
keyboards. Yes, he is.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree with that.
I mean, he very rarely plays anything that seems super flashy, but it just fits in so perfect. I mean, you can't imagine a song like Breakdown without his parts. You just can't.
Who else would play in that band? You couldn't even think of another keyboard player that could fit.
No, and I think you hit that right there. Is the Tom, Mike, Bentmont, like that was the core of the band the entire time. Those three, whether it was the band, whether it was Tom's solo work, it was always those three. And then, obviously right around the greatest hits area is when the drummer changed, and I know their bassist died a few years after that. So there were some change-ups in the band right there in the early to mid 90s. But those three were the core. And what I think is amazing is like go back to it is like you listen to even some of their later stuff they did like Mojo and whatnot, and Mike has some killer leads on it. I mean, he's an amazing guitarist, but the thing about him is he plays what the song needs, and it could be the most simple lead part, or it could be this 3-minute long blues solo, and it's fantastic. It's just what the song needs. And Bentmont the same way. Like the keyboards are there in the background, but without them, it just doesn't work. So I've realized we've gone on over 3 minutes. So I'm breaking my rule, but so it's time for Bill to go to number 3. But I do have to throw in here one thing before I do this. If you don't follow him on Instagram, go follow Mike Campbell. About once a week, he sits down and just breaks down one of their songs and talks about the songwriting process and shows the different guitar parts. Incredible. Just go follow
I think
him.
I've seen that on YouTube.
One of these
He
days,
probably does it there, too.
I'll actually get an Instagram account, huh?
Everybody wants to see Scott's photos. Okay, anyway, Bill, number 3.
Okay, number 3 is one of my very, very favorite records of all time. Is one that by one of the biggest bands in history, but it's an album that nobody ever talks about. The band is the Eagles. The album is...
Wait, nobody ever talks about them?
No, nobody talks about this album. The album is On the Border.
Oh, great record.
I have that on vinyl.
Huh? What was that?
That's one I have on vinyl, but keep going.
Yeah. I still have it on vinyl. I didn't
Me
pull
too.
it out. There was so much about that record. I mean, we did 2 songs off of that album. We did Already Gone. And we did Best of My Love. And Best of My Love is the song where I really started to learn how to sing vocal harmonies. I'm still not a great singer, but I sing pretty good harmony, and I can do things like sing sevenths that a lot of people can't do. And I learned that from that song when I was 16 years old. Actually, before that, there was actually one of the pre-bands that we all talked about, and we did Already Gone and Best of My Love then. Just a great record, and I still love the title cut of that so much. On the title cut On the Border is just phenomenal.
That's a great one. That one and James Dean.
James Dean, Good Day in Hell.
Old 55.
Oh my God. And the Eagles didn't even write Old 55. That's a Tom Waits song. I remember seeing the Eagles a couple of times, and Glenn used to say, Tom wasn't a big fan of our song, our version of this, until he saw the royalty checks. And
Yeah.
then he was with it.
They kind of had that little, like, I don't know what you call it, like songwriter family with like J.D. Souther and Jackson Brown, and you know, they all kind of shared stuff.
Just what a freaking great record. And again, nobody talks about it. Everybody talks about that first album. Everybody talks about One of These Nights, which is when they really went completely huge. But to me, the thing that's interesting about On the Border is that there's two producers on that album. They started out with Glenn Johns, who, I mean, did the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and everything else, and he was the guy who did their first two albums. But they wanted to be more of a rock band, and Glenn said to him, "You're not a rock band. The Who is a rock band. That's not you." and as somebody who had worked with the Who, he knows that stuff. But you know, Glenn especially wanted to be a rock band, and so they ended up going to a different producer and going a completely different direction. And it worked, man.
That's awesome. Love that.
Great record.
Okay, Scott, it's you.
Well, again, in no particular order, just records that, and this is records that I was looking on the internet and on iTunes. I'm like, well, I could pick all of these, but it's too hard. So I just went through my record collection and I picked out records that I had, and records that I've had my whole life. So, which one? Number three. I'm a huge Alice Cooper fan, and this one, I don't know, can you see it?
Yeah.
Just barely.
Let's see here.
Yeah, there you go. Alice Cooper, Muscle of Love. What a great, great record, man.
So is that the actual cover? Just the cardboard
Yeah,
box?
it comes in a cardboard box.
Oh,
and
that's so
I mean,
cool.
you know, mine is it's beat up
So
because
cool.
it's my record. And then the inside is
There you go.
Very cool.
out in front of the live nude place. The Muscle of Love. And then
Yeah, what a great record. I mean, I love that title cut is amazing. What else is on? Is it Electa's on? Electa's on Billion
no, that's
Dollar-
$1 Billion Babies. But this one, I mean, I'll read them to you if you want. There's Big Apple Dreamin', Never Been Sold, Hard Hearted Alice, Crazy Little Sister. And if you're not like a Alice junkie, you're not gonna know this shit. And I don't even think Alice Cooper Band likes this record. But Working Up a Sweat, Muscle of Love, Man with a Golden Gun, Teenage Lament. Teenage Lament, that's a freaking amazing song, man. And what's the last one? Can't read it. It's too small.
Like I said, two old guys.
Well, I wrote a thing for the Substack.
Woman Machine.
For Alice Cooper. You know, and not that anybody needs to make a case, but you know, great songwriter and really understands pop music, man. I mean, really understands pop music. He did a thing a while back where he in an interview, and he said that if he was working with a young band, he would only allow them to listen to certain songwriters. And he gave a list, and it was not people you'd expect from Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
It was obviously Lennon and McCartney and Brian Wilson, but Burt Bacharach.
Yeah.
And
Because all his stuff is like vaudeville and big show tune. On Muscle of Love record, there's, I don't know, I think 2 or 3 songs that have horns in them, and one's got strings, and it's the total eclectic Alice Cooper fan record, but it was before $1 Billion Baby, so that was like my first experience with Alice Cooper. And I wear that record out. Now you can see I wore it out.
That's so cool. Okay, Scott's gonna drink, so I'm gonna jump into my number 3. So, I'll give you a little bit of a story. So,
Yeah, make sure you tell me when the time is up, because I'll talk forever.
you're doing good now. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in a house where very mellow music, a lot of kind of 70s folk. My first concert was actually America, and the reason why I was allowed to go see America is because Jerry and Dewey were my dad's friends from high school. Long story short, he played guitar with them in high school. He went on a Mormon mission, and when he got back, 2 of his best friends were in a huge band, America. So that's kind of the fun story. So I was allowed to go see my dad's high school buddies, and I believe it. My dad yelled back at them, and Jerry told me not to become a rock star. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But back when I was 17 years old, I went to a concert with one of my friends that my parents completely did not approve of. And it was the Jimmy Page, Robert Plant reunion tour, the Walking Into Everywhere tour. And so, and I will tell you, that concert blew my mind. And so my number 3 album is tied. I would call it the Bookends. So, of course,
Yes.
you have, there you go, one of the greatest rock albums of all time, Led Zeppelin 1. But I would bookend it, if I could find the copy, would be the Page and Plant studio album, Walking Into Everywhere, which is kind of like the post-Zeppelin final album those two did together. And I think it's a super underrated album. I've introduced a lot of Zeppelin fans to it who never wanted to listen to it, and a lot of them have realized it's as good as some of the later Zeppelin stuff. And the reason why I picked those 2 albums is so I saw them on that tour, and about, probably a third of the show was the new material, and then everything else was Zeppelin greatest hits, right? And up to that point, I had owned, I think, Zeppelin 4. I knew Stairway to Heaven, I knew Black Dog, but it had never clicked to me about why they were such a huge band. And after seeing Jimmy Page live, literally the next day I went and sold some stuff, and I bought the entire Led Zeppelin collection on CD, as well as the Page and Plant album, and pretty much just devoured that stuff. As a matter of fact, I should have pulled it out of the case. I actually also went out and bought a Les Paul.
Oh,
And
nice.
that
Because of
was
Jimmy
kinda-
Page?
Because of Jimmy Page. Although the funny thing is he actually played a PRS on that tour quite a bit. But anyway, that's completely unrelated. But that, and to this day, I would say Zeppelin is tied for my favorite band of all time. That show just opened my eyes to what a guitar could actually do. And it was, once again, I came off the heels of a lot of the 80s shredder stuff, and some of it's great, some of it's very stylistic. I mean, Eddie Van Halen had a lot of style, but some of it was just speed for the sake of speed. And watching Jimmy Page and extended solos and all those things, and realizing that, like, another one, like, I feel like, especially on the albums, he played to the song. I mean, incredible solo after incredible solo. And I bring up I think Zeppelin once, maybe, it's tied that or House of the Holy, probably my 2 favorite Zeppelin album. But one, I actually played in a band, we did a lot of acoustic sets, and we picked up songs off this album like Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, and things like that. Tangerine we played a lot too. That's actually
Man,
that's
great
on
song.
their 3rd album, or 2nd. No, is that on this one? I don't know. No, Tangerine's on 3, I think. But we used to play a lot of stuff off of this. We learned Communication Breakdown, things like that. Good Times, Bad Times, I think, is maybe the greatest album, like first track on an album of all time. So I love Zeppelin 1, but I would bookend that with, if you're not familiar with it, you should go check out Page and Plant, which is the Walking Into Clarksdale, also an incredible album. There you go. That's my number 3.
I have to admit, I never listened to the post-Zeppelin stuff. I did see Zeppelin in '77, 7th row center, and on the floor at the Fabulous Forum in Inglewood, California. When,
that would have been 20 years before I saw those 2 together.
Yeah, something like that. I was 17. And we got free tickets. There was this guy I knew who had a neighbor who had been a lighting guy, like for the Eagles and some other. He had like gold records up on his walls and stuff. And Zeppelin was in. They were doing 7 shows, I think, and everything was sold out. And we went, I wonder if he can get us tickets. And he called him up. He goes, man, can you get us tickets for Zeppelin? He goes, give me a few minutes. Calls back like 15 minutes later. He's like, 7th row, okay? Didn't cost us anything. He just got his tickets, and we were just like freaked out, man. And that was the night that John Bonham went to do his solo, and as he starts, this little guy with a very broad English accent walked out and said, "The greatest effing drummer in the world, Mr. John Bonham," and then went back and started playing timpanis and stuff while Bonham was playing, and he realized, oh, holy hell, that's Keith Moon.
That's incredible.
And oh my!
That's only a few years before they both passed away too.
It was actually the last time he played in front of a public audience. They went when they did the Kids Are All Right movie. They did some performance stuff on a soundstage, like for invited guests. But that was the last time he ever played in a place where people could buy tickets and come in. It was, it was pretty astounding.
That's awesome. And with that, see, mine keep going over 3 minutes. I'm the problem. Okay, Bill, you're up for number 2.
Okay, so number 2, and I can't believe I'm going to save this last one, the number 1. I'm actually going to admit it. Okay, number 2, Silk Degrees by Boz Scaggs. I mean, maybe not something that people don't think of as a big guitar album, but I'll tell you something. I learned minor 9 and dominant 13 chords because I had to learn how to play Lowdown. It wasn't until it was in the last 10 years that I finally sat down and actually learned the little guitar solo parts in that, which were all Les Dudek.
That's Dudek, yeah.
I mean, an amazing player who gets no credit. Most of the time anymore, he's not somebody people think about a lot. Man, just what a great record. How we did this, I think we only did this because my friend Mark Piotr, who had joined the band and was a way better guitar player than me, also played flute. And so I think that's why we did that, because we had an actual flute player to play that part. Because God knows, we didn't have a keyboard player. And, how you do that Boz Scaggs material without an electric piano and strings and everything else is beyond me. I'm sure we did it really, really poorly. But we at least tried to do Lowdown and Love Me Tomorrow for sure. Maybe What Can I Say? I don't remember if we did What Can I Say or not, but I know that we did a Lowdown and Love Me Tomorrow, which is weird because it's almost like a reggae beat at a time when most people had no idea what that was, including me.
That's awesome. That's a great pick. Okay, let's go to Scott for number 2.
Number 2, well, again, it's just records that I had and records that I like, records I grew up. There's just so many records you could say were influential in your life, and this is not part of this record, but I mean, everybody who knows me knows that, Your Mama Don't Dance, that's the Loggins and Messina, that's the one that made me want to play bass. But this record, Grand Funk, we're an American band.
Oh, I almost picked that. On the gold vinyl.
The gold, that's very cool.
I actually played this record. I love records. I'm a huge record junkie. I mean, you get it's huge. You get records to pull out, and they make them in different colors. This one, you got nothing on the sleeve, but you got a colored vinyl. But anyways, this is when they became, I think this is when they became Railroad Baby, because the keyboard player joined, I think, maybe around this band, Craig Frost.
I believe that's right. I mean, they always had keyboards because Mark Farner
Right.
played guitar
Right. But
but they would do I mean, when they did their live album after that stuff, that opening song they would do foot stomping music.
Yeah. Two
Both
keyboards.
played
Yep.
keyboards, man. It
No
was like
doubt.
there was no guitar on that song,
No
man.
doubt.
Carter and Craig Voss were both playing Hammonds. It was pretty cool.
Great. Yeah, and I like this record. I don't know. We're an American band. That's the big song off of this record, and that was huge when I was a kid. And it wasn't until recently I found out that the drummer is the one who wrote the song. It's most of the time it's him and Foreigner or some other writer, but this one, Don Brewer gets all the credit. And
Is this the album that Zappa produced, or is that the album that Rundgren produced?
this is Todd Rundgren produced. This is the first one with Todd Rundgren. You know, I think what they say it was Criteria Studios in Miami, Florida, with Todd Rundgren, like 1970, I don't know, something. But yeah, what a great record.
And we all played American Band.
Yeah.
I mean, and to this day, it still goes off every once in a while. 'Cause I've got a bunch of people on my phone that are set up with a custom ringtone. And for a while, anybody I was playing music with, if I got a text, it played a little snippet of "We're an American Band."
Great
Yeah.
record. Great record.
That's awesome. If I don't have a custom ringtone, I want one. We'll talk about that later. What I want though, I'm gonna make my choice. Actually, probably Right Said Fred Too Sexy would be mine, just because that would be really weird. Okay, so my number two. Now I have to throw my number two. Actually, should be number one, but there's a story progression between 2 and 1, which is why they're in reverse order. But that's okay. So I've already talked about how my family did not listen to a lot of rock music, but it would have been Christmas of 1993. I got my first CD player. And for Christmas, my mom got 2 CDs. And I happened to have them both on CD and vinyl. I could only find vinyl for one of them, but this is the first half of the collection.
Oh, yeah.
I
Nice.
knew that was coming.
So anybody knows me knows that the Beatles are... That's basically what I learned to play on. So my mom got that and the red greatest hits and the blue greatest hits, the 2 greatest hit collections.
Yeah.
And I basically listened to those 4 albums nonstop for probably a year. I went out and bought a super basic Beatles guitar book and learned basic chords on everything. And, you know, I was born a decade after the band broke up. I was born 3 months after John Lennon was shot. I mean, there's no reason why, you know, when I was in middle school or junior high or whatever, that I should have been as fascinated by the Beatles as I was, but I was that weird kid when everybody else was, you know, loving Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins. I was listening to my Beatles albums. But I mean,
Because they were great.
I remember the first time I heard Revolution, and that just over the top distortion where he's, you know, John's overdriving the preamp and the console. I mean, it opened my eyes again to music, and suddenly it was something that I had and I had accessible in my house, and I learned to play literally everything on these albums. To this day, like, I pull Beatles songs out right and left when I'm playing, just because I've probably learned almost all their songs at some point or another. I've got, you know, the complete scores. That was like the next book I bought that has all the parts. Scott would appreciate this. Just this year for Christmas, I got a Hofner violin bass.
Oh, yeah, very cool.
And I, you know, of course, I strung it up with the same flat wounds that Paul uses on it. Bill knows this. I have an Epiphone Casino as well because of John. I think in the last time we talked about my Dr. Robert pedal, which emulates the Vox UL 70 or whatever it is, that obscure hybrid the hybrid solid state tube amp that they used on Revolver and Sgt. Pepper. I mean, I just cannot get enough of their music, and so I have to put them there. I wanted to be a musician, but that was the band, that was the music that took me from wanting to learn to play to putting in the effort to actually learn to play, you know. So anyway, such a huge influence for me. So there you go. Beatles greatest
I know,
hits.
like one. I know a few Beatles songs, but my favorite Beatles one that I learned to play, "You Know My Name."
That's awesome. I love it.
Do you know that song?
I learned it years ago. I probably couldn't play it right now, but such a
Yeah,
great song.
it's 2 chords.
Oh, is it?
The entire song's 2 chords.
Yeah, I'd have to go sit down and look at it again. Doesn't surprise me at all.
Oh, great
And
song.
that would be another band where I think, you know, you look at them and I think in a lot of ways George Harrison kind of defined what a lead guitarist was, and I think he was far better than people ever gave him credit for.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
is one of my favorite guitar players of all time, and if you just look at his progression throughout the years, like where he starts and when he's playing at the end, plus, I mean, Paul's bass lines, it's so fun to look at their progression and see just how amazing. I mean, they were great when they started, and they just got better and better and better. And I think, you know, even some of their solo stuff, you just continue to see that progression from them as musicians and whatnot. So anyway, I will stop. I'm way over 3 minutes. Bill, it's your number one.
Okay, so before I go to number one, I'm going to mention, you talked about, you know, the Beatles thing was from your mom. When I was growing up, there was this, we had this kind of pony wall between the dining room and the living room with cabinets in it, and one of those cabinets was where the records were. They're my parents' records. And there were a few albums in there that stuck with me. Weird stuff. John Denver's Rocky Mountain High, which is some great songwriting on that. Whatever you think about John Denver,
I still have it.
there's a great record.
That would be another one I grew up on. So there you go.
Yeah.
There was Blood, Sweat, and Tears Greatest Hits, you
Yeah,
know.
great.
And not a surprise that I ended up in horn bands later on. The Best of Bread.
Oh,
Don't
love it.
anybody give me any crap about it. Again,
Love
great
it, man.
songwriting, man.
Guitar Man.
Yeah, Guitar Man, Mother Freedom, you know, great
Yeah.
stuff. The one that sticks out to me, and I just listened to it again the other day, Trilogy by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. How that ended up in my parents' cabinet, I have no idea. It makes no sense at all. There wasn't a hit on it, but I'm a huge prog rock fan, and that's where it started. But number one, and I can't believe I'm going to admit this, is not necessarily my favorite album of all time, but I know it had big impacts on me as far as being in a band and doing that stuff, and it has to be Kiss Alive.
Oh, great.
Without a doubt, man.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
The first gig I did with the band before we did one thing. We played at a party, and we all painted up, man.
Yeah.
And we were only a 3-piece, so there was no
Love
ace. And we played Strutter, and we played Rock and Roll All Night, and yeah, I mean, I say what you will, man.
They're
but
great. They're
what a
great.
hugely influential band, and
Is that
there's
your
a
favorite
whole
Kiss
bunch-
album?
A whole bunch of rock musicians who came up on that as
Yeah.
you know, something they were really listening to.
No doubt. No doubt. Is that your favorite Kiss album?
Yeah, I mean, I was never, honestly, I was never a huge fan of the studio stuff except Destroyer. Destroyer's an amazing record. But yeah, that album was just, you know, well, I'll put a link on it in here. There is actually a full video of their shows at Anaheim Stadium. You can see the one time, the time I saw them when I was a kid. I've seen them a few times since then, but yeah. I mean, when you're 17 years old and you see Kiss, it's
I
like,
get it.
holy crap! What is this?
That's the time that I saw him too, Kiss Alive. Yeah, great.
That's a great pick. Okay, Scott, you're up number one.
All right, well, I don't know if it's my number one all-time favorite record ever.
We were going influential, so it doesn't have to be your favorite all time ever. Just most
But-
influential.
And I don't know, a lot of the songs on this record are other people's songs, but
Oh,
the Jay Giles Band, "Blow Your Face Out," is a double live record.
is that the one with that amazing version, that amazing live version of Must Have Got Lost on it?
Yes,
Yeah.
and this is on the Gray Atlantic record label. This is the actual record I owned since I was a kid. And all their songs are in there. Southside Shuffle, Back to Get You, Shoot Your Shot, Must Have Got Lost, Where Did Love Go, Truck Driving Man, Love-itis, House Party, So Sharp, Detroit Breakdown. Holy cow, man.
Yeah.
Chime, Snow Cone, Wait, Raise Your Hand, Start All Over, and Give It To Me. That was like their big hit in the 70s. But
this is all before, before Centerfold and everything, people forget Centerfold was like their second bite of the apple, they had been a big band for years before that.
That was their definitely their second time around. Centerfold, Freeze Frame. I hated those songs, and most Giles band fans that I know, we didn't like them either.
Well, it was very different. It was like a totally different band.
Even stuff like Love Stinks. I mean, Love Stinks is okay, but that was like towards the end, like end of the 70s. But this band and this record, I saw these guys at Springfield Civic Center in Massachusetts. I don't remember what year, 70s. I'm in high school. And they came back 5 times for an encore.
Well, it was Massachusetts, cool. Man. They were a Boston band. I mean, come on.
But I've never, and to this day, I've never seen a band come back 5 times for encores. I bought this record the next day.
See, I love that. I love the, it's when you see a band and you go out and buy their music the next day. Like, it's just, it's so fun to have that, like, connection. But
well, they didn't have, obviously they didn't have CDs and really they didn't even have cassette tapes when I bought that record. They had 8-track tapes, and you could have songs on reel-to-reel, but that was it. And where I lived in Massachusetts, we didn't really have like chain record stores. We had one record store that was a mail-order record store, and you could go in there and buy it was a huge place. You could go in there and buy records, but you had to know the record label that the band was on, because it wasn't. They didn't have Jay Giles and then Joan Baez. They had Atlantic Records, Motown. You had to know which label they were on, and then you could go and. I would be in there for hours.
Oh yeah, I love record stores, man. I miss records.
Well, I miss them too, and we actually have 2 here in Utah that are quite good. And every once in a while, when I get a chance, I just go and I just love it. I miss, for me, obviously it wasn't the record store. For me, it was the CD store. But I miss just spending hours in there and going through and flipping through what we had, and sometimes buying stuff just because you knew the name and you knew the cover. But anyway, I have to jump into this. I'm gonna go to my number 1. But before I bring it up, I'm gonna ask Bill, do you know what it is? What's your guess?
I don't know.
Really? I figured you'd guess right off.
It's got to be a Weezer album. There you go.
It is.
All right.
Well, that's a great record, though.
Self-titled album. Hold on, Scott. This is for you. It is on marbled blue vinyl.
Yes, that's great, man. That's great.
So obviously I bought it on CD back in 1994.
Yeah.
So that album came out about a year after I'd gotten to the Beatles. And, I didn't have a big connection with 90s music until that album came out. And I actually remember the first time I remember hearing Buddy Holly, thought it was okay, heard the Sweater Song, and I was sold. I went out and bought that album, and I spent my summer when I was 14 years old learning to play that album from cover to cover. It was interesting because I started playing in a band kind of the year before. I'd mentioned we were playing some Tom Petty stuff. We were playing some Beatles stuff. We were trying to do some Aerosmith stuff, but not really popular with the kids our age at that time. The Blue Album was the first album that I had bands cover where people were like, loved it because it was now our generation of music. And I would say I have covered the Sweater Song and closed. I probably played that song live more than any other song I've ever played. And the reason why is I found out in high school, you could play a set, you could do original material, you could do whatever, and people wouldn't be that interested. And if they weren't interested, if you pulled out the sweater song, everybody knew it and everybody would sing along. And I had a band in college that my buddy Corey, who was the other guitarist, he and I would play the sweater song. And as we were playing it, we would kind of banter back and forth in the beginning where, the song is like hey man, how's it going? Life's so rad. But I'd be like, hey Corey, how do you think the show's going? And he'd respond. I'd be like, how do you think the audience is liking this? And people would explode. They would love it. They would love that you'd have the banter about them in the song. Everybody would sing along. I have so many great memories of playing that song live, of playing that album. It is by far my favorite Weezer album. Bill knows how big of a fan I am, and it's probably in my top 2 or 3 favorite albums of all time. I love that album so much, and of course, I still buy everything Weezer does, even on vinyl and CD and everything else. Even though some of it's total garbage, they've had some rough years, but that album is probably and I will say, I swear by this to this day, "Say It Ain't So" is the greatest song of the '90s. Period. Came out.
I love that record.
Well, I was late to the Weezer party, and it was Tim who got me into it. And it's like now I probably own a half a dozen Weezer albums, and and when there's a new anything that's got Rivers' name on it when it comes out, I'm going to listen to it. It may be really whacked out, but it's usually really pretty good.
Well, I've got my son really into him, and we've been laughing about their latest, the spring album they've done, and the song "The Shakespeare Makes Me Happy." And so my son and I will always just randomly bring that line up to each other. I'll be like, "Hey Chase," he'll be like, "What?" And I'll be like, "Shakespeare makes me happy," just because it's just like this ongoing joke. Because sometimes the lyrics are just so awful and so cringy, but there's just something lovable about them. So there you go.
Well, that's the only Weezer record I own. And I bought the CD when it first came out. Here's a quick story. I won't take long. I'm working as a sound man at this club in West Hollywood called Luna Park. And I get to be the sound man in the big room tonight. We got this guy from Israel come in and blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to play some music on the PA before I put on the Weezer CD. I'm cranking it. Sounds amazing. The head bartender girl comes up to me and says, "If you don't take that off right now, you're not getting another drink the rest of the night." The entire bar staff hated it. And they gave me dirty looks all night long.
That's incredible.
Oh, I love that record, though. It's a great record.
We must be wrapping up because Scott's got disco lights going on behind him.
I'm not sure why, but I think because everything's so wireless around here that sometimes some interference comes along.
Yeah, it was actually it was really cool. It was flash. It was like blue, then green, then red.
I was going to say we're almost to our recording limit with this program, so we better wrap up.
Who's got honorable mentions? Anybody?
Oh God, Captain and Me by the Doobie Brothers. And again, it's something with staying power when you're still playing the same songs 35, 40 years later. Neil Diamond, yes, absolutely. I had that record.
This is an amazing, amazing record. This guy is an amazing songwriter. Holy cow. There's not one bad song on this record.
Nope.
See, I would throw out, mine's going to be more 90s. Mine would be, I would throw Blink-182 in there because it introduced me to punk, which I played in a lot of punk bands in college. Green Day would be in there, Dookie. I would probably throw in, when I first started learning to play, it was kind of Aerosmith Resurgent. Get a Grip was a big one we learned a lot off of. I could keep going down that, but
Chuck
yeah,
Berry.
Mine would be, that's so cool.
Londonderry Sessions. Do you know that one?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Half of it's live and half of it's studio. This is where My Ding-a-Ling came from and Reelin' and Rocket. All London players backing him on. amazing. You can find all the videos now on YouTube. Amazing.
Well, I guess that's
Okay.
it. You gonna
That's
wrap
it.
this?
Well, we
Oh,
got to wrap this up before we get cut off. Oh, there's another one. Scott will keep going with everything he owns in the collection. Now,
yeah. So we'll fade out, and we'll just let Scott keep throwing albums.
okay. Well, with this has been fun, guys. Let's put together a playlist so people can check it out. And
My
anybody
first
who's-
record.
Say anybody who's that's awesome. Anybody who's paying attention to this on the internet, let us know what your top 5 are, what your favorite albums are.
Amazing.
And, with that, I'm an hour behind you guys, so I'm going to take off and go to bed.
You do that. Oh, and we have actually had a request for a show. Somebody wants us to talk about the pros and cons of NAMM. Are you going? Why should you go? Why should you care?
Everyone should at least go once.
I say next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now or whenever we actually do this again, whatever this is, that topic.
That's
We're good.
what we're going to do. Okay.
See you guys.
See you guys.
Have a good night.